Hey friends, it's Kari from the Alfred Homestead, and today I wanted to share with you a super simple and free raised garden bed. We just went ahead and started putting in some new garden beds for our garden. Previously, we did not have any garden beds because, well, number one, we were pretty new here. We had a bunch of other things to try and do and infrastructure to get set up. But number two, there are just some schools of thought that are against raised garden beds, like, getting slugs to come into your garden and voles. They just like those planks. Um, and, anyways, we just found that over time it would be so much easier to keep the garden weed free and keep the little ones and their little feet out of the garden and the plants by having a raised bed. And just so that we have like a more designated area for the compost that we're creating. So anyways, this garden bed project only took 1 hour for one bed, and that bed was 20 feet long and 3 feet wide. So that's just going to give you an idea of how long this project can take. It can be as simple as you want to make it. You don't have to do anything fancy, and in fact, we're keeping it really simple today. My husband is going down into the woods and getting some cedar wood. So we've got a lot of cedar trees. You want to use cedar if you can, like a hard redwood, something that's going to withstand the decay a little bit better, and the infestation, of course. But you can use any trees that you happen to have on your property. And in fact, it doesn't even have to be a whole tree. You could just take branches and put stakes in the ground outlining the border of your bed and then weave the branches in between them and have a woven type of raised garden bed. For us, my husband has the manpower, he's got the tools to go ahead and just take down some trees. The diameter of these were small enough that he could handle them. So, if you don't have a big tractor that can pull a huge tree, then, do what we did and take a smaller tree. So our beds were still able to be about 20 feet long. You certainly don't even have to go that long. You could have a 5 or 6 foot long bed. That way you don't have to worry about hauling this massive tree to your garden space. So my husband just went ahead and chainsawed those branches right off and just dragged it over to the garden area, just like that. And a dolly came, very helpful, of course. Our dolly is like our number one used tool on the homestead, I'm pretty sure. And here he's just using the assistance of the dolly to help line those trees up. So we've got 3 logs here now, all roughly equal sizes, because we want 2 long sides and then we have the 2 shorter sides. We'll cut the shorter tree that was only about 19 feet long. We'll cut that one up to make the sides for the beds because the sides are only about 3 feet. So that'll be perfect for that. So we're just measuring out 20 feet because, like I said, that's just the size that we wanted. We generally kept 50-foot long beds, but we've decided to cut that in half. That way we could have a nice 3-foot wide walk space between the 2 rows of beds. So we're going to do 20 feet here. Again, keep it however manageable you want to keep it. If you can't haul this massive log, then, do a 10-foot bed or do a 5-foot bed even. You don't have to do these massive beds, especially if you don't have that much compost to fill it in or you're just working your way up to developing your garden. So he's just going to cut those to size. And again, these are really not the biggest trees. I've seen people do much bigger trees and that works for them, but we're just doing something much more manageable. We don't want massive raised beds where it's going to be harder to water them. And I feel like when you have a really tall bed that's like say 18 inches tall, it's harder to keep it watered. Maybe that's wrong thinking. Maybe that's not the case, but I feel like we compromised by at least getting the garden a little bit off of the ground, just enough to help us with the weed pressure during the summer, which can really be intense, and also just outlining the beds for aesthetic purposes, because who wants to just see a jungle of plants? I don't know. It can get pretty crazy in the middle of July and August, and little ones are all over the garden and stepping on the plants, not realizing that they're stepping, right in the garden bed. So this is going to be such a lifesaver next summer. And right now, we really needed to get these beds going because if you haven't seen my video, we have a 30-day compost system going, and we're doing it very intensively. So every week we're starting a brand new compost pile. If you haven't seen that video, go check it out. 30 days and you've got awesome compost to use. It's amazing. I highly recommend it. Go check it out. So we have to move some of those compost piles out of the composting area now because it's done. It's ready. It needs to go ahead and be placed where it needs to go until next year. So that's why we needed to go ahead and get these beds done now. So as long as we can make one bed per week for the next, I don't know, 4 to 8 weeks, then we will have a place for all of our compost. We estimate that we're going to have about 6 to 8 beds. So we'll have about 6 to 8 compost heaps that will have to be moved here in the next month or two. So my husband is just cleaning off the edges so that there's no like rough edges that are going to snag on anything or, cause you to trip on them or anything like that. You can also be fancy and put in some notches, like good old-fashioned log cabins would. Those are really cool. Again, this was just a 1-hour super quick project and we're not super concerned about it. You could also just take some rebar and put that between to secure the logs. If your logs are warped or anything, maybe that would be a good solution. For us, these logs were very straight, so luckily we didn't have too much of an issue securing them. They weren't rolling around or anything like that. However, so if you find that there is like a gap between the log and the ground, you can always fill that in with dirt. We filled in any small gaps with some mulch. We have a ton of mulch still from last year. So we just went ahead and like shoveled that little gap in with some mulch. So these beds, because they are cedar, will probably last us a decade. They might even last a little bit longer. It just depends on, the weather and the extremities. All right, so we've got these posts in the ground that marks exactly where the logs should go so that we know they're exactly straight. They're not, veering off to the side in any way. So my husband is just making sure he's pushing those logs flush to those little posts. All right, so now we're just gonna cut off a little bit from a smaller log that we had. It wasn't quite 20 feet, so we thought, well, this will be perfect use. We'll cut off the sides. We'll use this tree for the sides of the beds. So we cut off 3 foot. That's just how wide we wanted our beds. Choose whatever side works for you. And this is what it looks like. The basic shape is done. So from here, we went ahead and like I said, we just popped some mulch into any of the gaps that might have been there just to help firm it all up and even it up, make it flush with the ground a bit better. Just do this as needed. We didn't even do that much, so it wasn't too big of a deal. And so now we're going to go ahead and make sure if you have a bunch of grass, make sure you cut that grass down and make sure everything's flush taken to the ground so that you're not layering compost or anything like that on top of, tall grass. So what we're going to do next is we're going to take all of the cardboard that we've been saving up over the last couple of weeks. We always save our cardboard, and even when we go drop off the trash, a lot of times if my husband sees a large size, a nice big cardboard, then he will just bring that right on home because we'll pop that right in the garden so fast. Those bigger pieces are really nice to use, but you can definitely just use these small little Amazon boxes. That works just as well, and that's what we ended up using here. Always make sure that when you're laying down your cardboard in the garden that you have saturated it, that it's wet. You don't really want to lay it down dry. It's just going to take that much longer to kind of decompose, and it's going to be a hassle trying to get it to stay down. And anyways, just make sure it's been nice and saturated as best as you can. And of course, we're just going to try and make sure we layer every little bit so that there's nothing, no peaking spots that are going to let grass shoots come up next summer when we're trying to focus on our vegetables or anything like that. You definitely want to make sure everything's nicely covered by the cardboard. All right, so next my husband went and gathered one compost pile. So one compost pile ended up being just enough for this one bed. We wanted it really thick. You don't have to put it this thick, of course. If you've just got some like topsoil that you want to put down and then you want to amend it with compost, do whatever you need to do. We wanted to put a nice thick layer down because we have drainage issues and we're trying to amend the soil and we're trying to add organic matter as best as we can to the soil over time to help the drainage. So we went really heavy with the compost. We put in a good 8 inches. I recommend at least 6. We did 8. But anyways, that's our project and it only took 1 hour, so I hope that gives you some inspiration on how you can do your own garden bed. I will make sure to show you guys the finished product after we've finished all of the beds. But for now, that's it. I'll see you guys next time.